Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you're watching my walkthrough for Chrono Trigger for Nintendo DS. This video covers the chapter titled The Guru on Mt Woe and takes place just after we have returned to 12,000 BC using the Epic and then gone through Algeti and fought the Mud Imp and the Mud Beast below and have climbed up the chain to get on top of the Mountain of Woe. Our goal here is to free the Guru of Life, who has been sealed here by order of Queen Zeal, and he's one of the only people who is opposed to her. So in order to stop her plans with the Ocean Palace, we are trying to save the Guru of Life. So one of the first things to know about this area is you can charm a lot of the enemies here to get weapons for Chrono, Robo, and Frog, and these are all really high quality items that will actually be available after the Mountain of Woe. We'll have access to a shop where we can purchase these items, but you can get them for free by just charming them here, so they're very nice quality. So these are nicer quality than the items that you could have purchased in Algeti just a moment ago. So I'd recommend you just don't buy those items that are down there because we can get better ones right here. Now, one of the enemies that's worth talking about is the Bomber Birds / Bantan Imps. Now, these enemies have a bird and an imp that is attached to them. When you smack them, then the bird will disappear and you're left with just the imp. Now, this is called a Stone Imp, and they can be charmed as well for a different item. Now, you can only charm them once, so if you charm them while a bird, then you try to charm them while they're just the Stone Imp, you don't get any items for them because you've already charmed that particular enemy once. They just transform, is what happens. So anyways, you can only charm each enemy once, but you get to decide if you want it to be a sword or if you want it to be a mid-ether, depending on if you smack them before you charm them or not. So that's one weird thing to know about this particular enemy. Now, between the two, I would highly recommend you charm the sword because the sword is worth over 10,000 gold, meanwhile a mid-ether is only worth 1,000. So just as a sheer gold standpoint, they're worth 10 times as much money. However, of course, when you sell them, you only sell them for like half or 60% or whatever it is. We're only going to be able to sell it for like 5,000. But regardless, you can always just get a whole bunch of swords and sell them, and you can buy 5 times as many mid-ethers. So anyways, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and charm the swords instead. Now, if you go counterclockwise through this area, you will find a Platinum / Load Helm, which is a slightly better upgrade from the Radiant Helms you could have optionally charmed just a little bit ago. We only get one of these at this time, but it is still a really nice item. So anyways, go ahead and grab that. Now, there's also a bunch of new enemies here called Rubble. Now, these guys just sit there. They don't do anything. They actually just flee after a little bit, but you can go ahead and smack them. As long as you do enough damage, you should be able to kill them easily. They do disable your techs and your items. Fortunately, we don't have any combat here in this particular area where you have to fight them along with other enemies. Then they'd be really annoying, but it's not really that big a deal. So anyways, I would recommend you go ahead and kill them whenever you see them, though, because it's a bunch of free XP. So moving on, you can avoid this particular combat by just hugging the really far right wall. As long as you just stay right along the edge, you should be able to avoid it. Again, these particular Bantan Imps, otherwise known as Bomber Birds, can be charmed to get swords for Chrono, but they sell for a lot of gold, so I would recommend that you go ahead and charm these guys. But yeah, the Rubbles don't fight back, so they're a really easy way to give you a good boost in TP for whatever characters you want. So if you see a Rubble in the distance, you can just walk up to them. As soon as you touch them, you'll start the combat, and you can defeat them really quickly with some auto attacks. Super easy. You'll probably defeat them before they run away. But anyways, you can totally swap out your party members because it's very easy to anticipate that combat. You can swap out your party members for whoever you want that you need some TP on. So in my case, it probably would have been smart to stop using Ayla for a moment and swap out for somebody else like Robo. So I have Robo and Frog because they're currently lagging behind in the TP department of all my characters. So if I had Robo and Frog and Chrono, and then go ahead and fight the Rubbles, I would get a good chunk of TP, and that would be the smartest way to utilize those particular combats. One of my priorities for this particular recording was I did want to make sure that Ayla learned the single tech Dino Tail, which will in turn allow her to also unlock the dual tech Inferno / Fire Whirl between her and Luca. It's a very powerful ability. Honestly, it's one of the best dual techs in the entire game. Really, really strong. And that ability is very good for this upcoming boss. So I actually did unlock it. It was one of the very first thing that happened in this video is I smacked some Rubble and I got enough TP for her that she learned that ability. So super good. So I actually already have that ability unlocked. So anyways, if you want to use that strategy with me, then just maybe get enough TP for Ayla specifically. Ayla is one of my higher TP characters at the moment, so I'm actually going to be swapping out and using Robo and such as well. Speaking of Robo, I just charmed a Heavy Hand / Big Hand off of those nearby gargoyles, which is an upgrade for Robo. I actually already have some of these items because I won them in the Arena of Ages, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm putting on items as we are unlocking them, even though I already possess them. But anyways, that's a nice little upgrade for Robo, so I'm slapping that on real quick. The swords for Chrono are, unfortunately, I have something even better, or maybe not unfortunately, but I am wearing the Swallow, which is a really nice item. So next I'm using a shelter to restore some MP for Ayla in particular, so that she can keep charming stuff. One thing I think is kind of funny about these rubble mechanics is that if you fight them but you don't actually kill them with your regular attack, but they run away, you can still get, you don't get any XP or TP, but you can use it to learn techs. So even if you miss just too much or whatever, so you can't actually kill them in time, you will still learn dual tech. So in this example, I have a team composition that I haven't used in a while, and I'm just showing the fact that it'll run away if you don't kill it, and you will still learn dual techs that you haven't unlocked yet. How dual techs work, by the way, is you have to have leveled up your characters to the point where they learn various skills. So in this case, it's probably Aerial Strike with Frog or whatever it's called, and then Luca is using Flare, or no, she's using Mega Bomb, that's what it is. So anyways, so depending on what abilities you have unlocked, you can still learn dual techs with Rubble, even if you don't manage to kill them. Speaking of which, I guess that's worth mentioning, so the two abilities that lead to Ayla and Luca learning Inferno is Ayla learning Dino Tail and Luca learning Mega Bomb. Those are the two abilities combined that lead to that ability. So I actually already have that unlocked, but I have, like, Luca has a lot of XP because I used her a lot in a lot of the previous chapters, so thus she has a lot of TP. But I suppose it's always possible that some of you didn't use her as much, but she's just so good for some of these earlier sections. Now, just so you know, as far as the enemies in this area, the one that's the biggest threat by far is the gargoyles. Now, they can be charmed to give you a heavy hand / big hand. That's a very nice item. However, they have some pretty nasty attacks. They have one attack that reduces your HP to 1, which is pretty awful. And they also have an ability that can absorb your MP, which can drain your characters very quickly. So both of those things are super annoying, so I would recommend you try and take them out as soon as possible. It's my highest priority, is getting those guys taken care of. So you haven't really seen this so much, but we're going to start getting these new items called Barrier Spheres and Shield Spheres. And what they do is Shield Spheres will give you when you use it, it'll apply the safe status effect to the particular character. It's the same thing as the Protect spell that Luca has, and so that will reduce incoming physical damage by 1/3. Meanwhile, the Barrier Sphere does the same thing. It gives you the Barrier buff, which will reduce magic damage by 1/3 that's incoming. So there are particular boss fights where that is pretty important, where you could take a lot of magical damage. So that's a way you could reduce that by quite a bit. So if you have each character at the start of the turn, at the very beginning of combat, if each one of them uses a Barrier Sphere, you can reduce all incoming damage, which is really, really nice. I would say, like, this upcoming dungeon, for example, there's several points where you have a lot of magic damage you're dealing with, so for example, so that could be pretty nice there. There's not really too many points in the game where I think it's super important, but it is kind of a handy thing to have. It's not always that important for the whole party anyways. It's typically like one character that kind of is suffering. So for example, in this team composition, Marl has very low physical defense, and then meanwhile Ayla has very low magical defense of the characters I currently have in my party, for example. So you can see that Marl actually has a golden border around her, a yellow border around her, and that is because she has the safe status effect, because she is currently wearing the Guardian Helm, that thing that I got from the Pyramid that was a really awesome defense item. So she's the one currently wearing that, and that's why she's in that weird pose, for example, is because she's taking reduced physical damage. This particular combat up ahead is activated once you get close to this chest as well. However, this particular one, you can actually sneak up on it on the left side. This particular one doesn't activate the combat. However, on the way back, it's almost impossible to not activate this combat. I find, like, I don't even know, 5 out of 6 times I end up starting combat anyways when I come back. I don't know, it's really hard to avoid this particular one. Not that it's a big deal, besides I want to fight these guys because I want to steal their swords anyway. But yeah, going back to the sphere discussion, I would say between a shield sphere and a barrier sphere that the barrier sphere is more worthwhile overall. I feel like it's the more useful of the two. And part of the reason for that is just because magic is typically the nasty thing that you're dealing with. When you're fighting a boss, if they have a physical attack, it's usually not the whole party. It's usually just a single target. So they'll hit one person really, really hard. That's the nastiest ability that you're really worried about. I mean, you can use a lapis, whatever, to heal from the little stuff. It doesn't matter. But it's the really hard-hitting ones. Those are the ones that are scary. And so typically each boss has just one scary ability, and that's what you really want to watch out for. So that being said, typically those nasty abilities are magical in nature. So if a boss unleashes this big lightning attack, and you're like, oh no, it hurts really bad, the character who's going to take the most damage from that is whoever has the lowest magic defense. So in this particular team composition, that would definitely be Ayla. Ayla's going to get pwned by that. However, because, like as I was just explaining, if that attack is always lightning, all you have to do is put the white plate on Ayla, and then she heals from the boss instead. So that'll actually keep her totally alive, she's totally safe, and then you don't really have to heal her at all because the boss will heal her for you. So at that point, you're just using barriers on the other characters. Anyway, so if you plan ahead, Usually you don't need to use a barrier because you're just totally fine. In this area up ahead, you can avoid this particular combat by hugging the north wall. I think you can also take the south wall and avoid it, but it's a lot harder to pull off, so I feel like the south wall is just not as doable. If you go through the south or you go through the middle, you'll cause this combat with the stone imps. Now again, if you charm these guys, they'll give you a mid-ether. I don't really think that's super worthwhile. The gargoyles have a much more valuable item, however, they all are also pretty nasty. They hurt pretty bad, so I'd like to take care of them as soon as possible. I guess to clarify a little further, I don't feel like barriers are worth it in regular combat. The only time you're ever going to use it is for a boss battle, but as long as you plan ahead and you know the boss mechanics, usually you can use the appropriate colored plate or vest, and you can avoid a majority of that damage anyway, so the barrier doesn't really become super worthwhile. I feel like overall, between casting a bunch of barriers, I would rather just heal every once in a while with a, say you have, if two of your characters are healing from all the boss's attacks instead, and you have your last character just doing some supplemental healing just to fix them up if they get hit with some physical attack, and also to heal the healer, then it's you use Robo or something with Heal Beam, and that's all you need. That's it. You just heal the whole party a little bit all the time, and then otherwise you're just using their techs as well to deal damage. So anyways, if you just plan ahead a little bit, you don't actually need to worry about it. So I know that text is flying by because I'm fast forwarding a lot, but Marl just learned Ice 2, which is one of the single techs that she needs that is one of the combinations that is necessary for a lot of her dual techs. So now I'm going to do some combat with a bunch of other characters to get her to learn those dual techs real quick. So I haven't actually fought with Chrono, Marl, and Luca in a little while, and because Luca has meanwhile learned Mega Bomb, I think is what it's called, which is our single tech, now I have access to Antipode Bomb 2, as well as the triple tech Delta Force, which is a really good ability between these three characters. I'm also going to learn Delta Storm, as well as a couple other abilities as well. So I have some more double techs and triple techs to learn real quick before I proceed to the boss. This just gives me options. I like to unlock them just so I have the option. I don't like getting into combat and then expecting to have an ability that I don't actually have. It always makes me frustrated. So I'm just going to unlock these all real quick. So we're starting to get into the point of the game where we have a lot of single techs, we have a lot of dual techs, and we're even starting to unlock a lot of triple techs for most team compositions, and that's really cool. And generally speaking, it doesn't really matter most of the time. You can win with any team composition, really, for the most part. I mean, some are better for particular fights, but generally speaking, you can kind of just do whatever you want. And as long as you're high enough level and you have enough damage, like for example, if an enemy has 800 life and you're doing 1,200 damage, then they're dead. They just lose. There's nothing else they can do about it. You just win. And that's great. As long as you do more than enough damage, you can do whatever you want, and it's totally a viable strategy. Do whatever you want. But just so you know, on the back end, there are some techs that are just better. Like their multipliers are just higher. So if you use this particular team composition versus another, then you're going to end up having overall better single target damage. Not just because of the abilities themselves, oh, this team composition has more single target available. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual damage numbers. So some techs are literally they'll be the same MP cost, but this one does, I don't know, 40% more damage or more. And so it just is superior. And again, it's because of those multipliers I was talking about. Earlier, all of our stats were so low and so similar that it didn't matter. If one character had 2 more strength, ooh, it didn't make much difference. But now we're starting to get to the point where those numbers are way higher. The difference in stats is 30 or more. The numbers are getting further and further apart, and as a result, those multipliers are much more noticeable. And again, because it's about multipliers, if this particular attack scales with one person's power stat and another person's power stat, even though they have 30 more power, but also their multiplier is they're getting an extra 30% more damage in per strength compared to the other character, then that gap is even larger. So it's not that gap didn't exist before, it's just the fact that because our numbers are getting larger, that gap is exponentially growing as well. And so it makes it even more noticeable that a particular ability is better. Now, a great example of this actually is Marl's single tech. She has 3 different healing abilities. However, Aura is starting to lag behind. It just doesn't quite heal enough. We're getting too much HP to the point where Aura just can't keep up. So we need to start using one of her other healing abilities. So she has Aura, which costs 1. It heals 1/3 of our HP at this point. We have Star Cure, which heals about 2/3 of our HP, or maybe 3/5. And then meanwhile, we have Cure 2, which costs 5 MP. It's quite a bit more expensive, but it will guarantee heal anybody completely. So those are the 3 abilities that she has access to. However, just so you know, the multiplier on Star Cure is very high, times her magic stat. So if you give Marl a little bit of extra magic, then Star Cure can be overboosted a little bit to the point where it will guarantee overheal everybody just the same way that Cure 2 does, because the multiplier is so high. So anyways, as a result, because I fed her a whole bunch of magic capsules earlier in the game, I was saying it boosted her healing and it makes her a really awesome boss healer. And I was talking about Aura at the time because that's what we had access to. But meanwhile, Star Cure is actually the reason why I did that, because I never have to use Cure 2 with her. So instead of using a 5 MP cost ability, I'm using Star Cure, which is just 2 MP. So for 2 MP, for a little less than half the MP cost of Cure 2, I can heal anybody in my entire party completely to full, which is just good. So like, there's no reason to use the more expensive one at all. Star Cure is just superior. It just is. So I know this probably would sound strange at first glance, but that's kind of the back-end mechanics of what's happening. So the reason I gave her a bunch of magic tabs wasn't to increase her damage, although that was a perk that happened as well. The main reason actually was to make her more mana efficient, so that I didn't have to worry about giving her a silver stud or a gold stud. I can just have her, she can heal like crazy, and then she has the extra mana capacity to spend on casting haste, or to be using damaging attacks like Antipode Bomb. So she can destroy the boss in between her healing, and she has more than enough mana capacity to do it so that I don't have to rely on using ethers or giving her better accessories that I'd rather have on somebody else. So anyway, that's how most of the techs are in this game. There's either like certain items and stuff that make certain abilities a little bit nicer, or just the ability itself has a higher multiplier, and as a result, you get more benefit out of the stats that you have. So there's certain abilities that are really, really good like that. For example, Inferno / Fire Whirl between Luca and Ayla, which is what I'm going to be using on the upcoming boss. So that's just a really good ability. Now up ahead, we are going to get a time hat in one of the chests nearby, and that's a super nice thing because it will allow you to prevent getting the slow and stop status effects on the particular character that you equip it to. We're going to start dealing with more and more status effects as the game progresses. Up until now, you've pretty much been able to ignore it, but pretty soon we're going to start having some bosses where, like, if you don't have status protection, it can just absolutely destroy you. It's really horrible. So you're going to have to start being able to counter some of those mechanics, otherwise you will just get mowed over. So the Time Hat is one of those good abilities that you can use towards the end of the game, although there are upgrades that are even better than that we can use eventually as well. So here we are at the Chain. Now as soon as you start climbing it, this will lead to the boss battle. I don't want to do that quite yet because I'm trying to unlock all of the various triple techs between my characters, and one of the abilities I still need is Water 2 with Frog. I only need just a little bit more TP. I'm actually almost there, which I'm actually surprised that I didn't quite make it. So this triple tech is going to be between Frog and Luca. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back a couple screens and like force some enemies to spawn and then kill them real quick, just so I can get enough TP so I can learn Water 2 and thus I can learn Delta Storm. So anyway, all that being said, I'm just unlocking everything that's kind of in the similar level range to what I have right now, just to unlock the most options. Also, I need to level up Frog a little bit anyways, but I would recommend for you, if you are interested in unlocking the triple techs, it might be easier to just look up a list online. Just type in like Chrono Trigger, triple tech list, chart, whatever. But a chart is definitely what you want to look at, and the reason is because in my example right now is I need to unlock Water 2 with Frog, his single tech. Once that's unlocked, then I will finally gain access to the related triple tech. So that's the thing that's currently missing for me. But it's not just a matter of having the correct team composition, it's that you have to have the correct abilities unlocked at this point. But yeah, basically what we want for this fight is we want something that hits the full screen, either the full screen or hits horizontally in a line. So what that means is like Falcon Strike, otherwise any of the other really good triple techs that hit the whole screen. So like Delta Force or, Inferno, or Antipode Bomb 2, anything like that will do really good damage for this particular fight. Now, as far as items, if you have the plates, which I highly recommend, you did that side quest with me a couple videos ago, this boss does shadow damage and fire damage. So you're going to want to put on the black and red plates, and then otherwise for your third character, you probably put on the red vest, and that way you can survive his attacks, or like his attacks will actually heal you instead. So it's just really, really good. You don't even really have to heal for this fight at that point. As far as accessories, that will depend on what abilities you're using, but I don't think the gold stud is really necessary for this particular fight. Instead, just put on either power or magic items depending on which team composition you're using. And that will actually depend on the ability, because, for example, Inferno is based off of Ayla's magic stats. So instead, actually, a magic ring would be a better accessory for her rather than a power ring. It depends on which ability you're going to use. As far as team compositions, I have a couple different recommendations for you. However, I will show a bad fight first, just so I can show you like the slower, not as good strategy, and then I'll show you a more optimized, like beefy strategy that'll just totally destroy everything. Now, once you finally get over to the chain, then what'll happen is you'll start hearing thunder and stuff in the background as you start getting close. This is kind of an indication that we have a boss battle, so just make sure that you heal and save right before we get up here. The first thing to understand about this boss is that it attacks using its hands, primarily using fire and shadow damage, so as long as you wear like some black plate and red plate in your characters, you should survive pretty well. Even though it can hit pretty hard, you should be able to survive through it. Otherwise, you can just mash, do Slurp Kiss, or Star Heal, or Heal Beam, and any of those abilities would probably help you survive pretty well. But generally speaking, the best thing to do by far is to take out the hands as soon as possible. So you just want to use something that hits the whole screen. This way you'll do damage to both the hands as well as the face at the same time. I would highly recommend you don't focus on single target abilities, at least at first. You want to hit the hands and destroy them as soon as possible. Now they do only have 2,000 life, which is not that much, and a lot of our abilities will actually do 1,000 damage if you're using a good, either one of the character's max level abilities like Flare or Luminaire do really good damage, and they can take out half of the arm's health in one go. Otherwise, you can also use some dual techs. So if you use some really hard-hitting dual techs, you might even destroy the arms in one turn. Once the arms are destroyed, you just need to focus on the face, and then at that point you can use whatever attack you have that's the hardest hitting ability. Now, whether that's full screen or it's a single target, doesn't matter at that point. You're just trying to do as much damage as you possibly can. So, you want to go ahead and just unload as much, the highest MP cost single target abilities you have, and take out the face as soon as possible. So once both of the arms are destroyed, then the head will restore the arms after a little while. It takes a long time, but it's very similar actually to the Guardian battle that we fought in Arisdome in 2300 AD. It's very similar to that fight. So what you want to do is just do as much damage to the core as you can, and then once it finally restores the arms, you want to switch back to doing multi-target attacks. So notice that Robo Tackle, for example, did more damage than Laser Spin by far, because Robo's power stat is pretty good. So, just want to use whatever combination, whether that's a dual tech or a single tech, whatever. This particular team composition, I would say, is probably the worst for this fight, because they don't really have any good dual techs. They have a decent amount of healing. Their multi-target heal is pretty good. So if you're not using the plates, I would still recommend you take out the arms as soon as possible. But at this point, if you didn't have the plate to heal you for all those attacks, you're probably pretty hurt, and now would be a good time to use Star Heal and Heal Beam. So you can bring all your guys back up to full, but in the meantime, then just keep attacking with Chrono. Now for this particular team, they do have triple attack, which is a single target attack that hits really hard actually. It's okay. It's relatively cheap as far as mana cost, but it hits pretty hard. So this is doing over 1,600 life. Now the boss only has 9,500 HP, so it's not going to take very many of these to bring him down. Now, if the arms are restored at this point, you might even just focus on the boss anyway, because it's not going to take too many turns to defeat him. So even if the arms do come back, at that point I'd probably just keep using triple attack and just focus the boss down, just knock him out as soon as possible. Now I would say overall this is the worst team composition. Now one of the reasons why that was so easy for me too, by the way, is the fact that I used Luminaire with Chrono. Luminaire is a very expensive ability that you may not have access to, so it's kind of a little bit ridiculous that I was even using that. So just in case a lot of you don't have access to that, it's probably more likely you could do something like this. As long as Marl has enough TP to where she learned Ice 2, then you should be able to cast the triple tech Delta Force between these three characters, and that because they're all focused on their magic damage, Chrono actually is the least magic damage of these characters, but this would be one of the hardest hitting triple techs that we have access to right now, but this will do great damage to the boss as well as the arms too. Now in this particular example, I do think the Delta Force is one of the best skills that you can use to take out the arms, but after that, you're probably better off actually switching to having Chrono do single target, and then you can have the other two girls use Antipode Bomb too, which does great damage, but it's only in a limited area, so they can use that on the boss to do really good magic damage, and then Chrono can switch to physical. Again, remember that Chrono is typically more focused on physical damage, and meanwhile the girls are more focused on magical damage. So if you have them use a solid, a pure magic damage dual tech, while Chrono's using a pure physical, you'll do overall more damage. In fact, Antipode Bomb 2 almost does almost as much damage as Delta Force just by itself. So just being a dual tech, it does almost as much damage as the triple tech, but you're only using two characters, which is pretty darn good. Chrono actually does as much damage as that just by himself, with just his physical attack with Frenzy, which is a very expensive ability, but as long as you have enough capacity to defeat the boss in that time, it doesn't matter. I feel like this team composition is really good, especially if you don't have the plates. If you didn't get the plates, invest with me by opening the sealed chest, so you don't have the option of absorbing elements, then I think this is a pretty good team choice, because Marl can haste everybody if she wants to. Again, I would still use Delta Force to kill the hands as soon as possible, because you're using a full screen attack, and that triple tech does a lot of damage. So you can do that at first just to get him neutralized so you're not taking any damage, and then you can either use Lapis to heal, or you can have Marl just heal everybody in turn real quick while Luca and Chrono are doing damage with Fire Sword 2, for example. So yes, this particular team composition is a little bit safer, has decent heals, but in particular they're a little bit more focused on full party or full area attacks, and as a result they can take out the hands really, really well. They also just don't take as much damage from the attacks because they have much higher magic defense. So this is just overall a really safe choice. So if you're not sure what to do, this is a good choice for you. Now because this boss primarily has full screen attacks, he's going to be hitting your whole party is primarily what he's going to be doing, so Marle's a little bit awkward because she's single target heals only. So having a character that can heal the whole party, like Frog using Star Heal, might be a little bit nicer, and you can do that after the arms are defeated. So to defeat the arms, all you have to do is just use like Delta Storm or something to hit the whole party. This is very similar to Delta Force, except it doesn't do as much damage because Frog's magic stat is significantly lower. Now I actually have been raising it quite a bit, and as well as Chrono, so my damage for this particular ability is probably a lot higher than yours will be in your game. But anyways, that's an option. So after the arms are defeated, you can have Frog switch to Star Heal, and have Chrono and Luca switch to, like, Fire Sword 2. Now, for just about every boss battle in the entire game, Marle is just a really solid choice. If you're not sure what to do, she's a really safe choice because she has great healing, and she can speed up everybody with haste. It's just super good for every boss battle because she'll double or even triple everybody's damage because she has some really good dual techs too. Now, as far as a third slot, I'd highly recommend Ayla. Ayla just has a lot of versatile options, and she just does great damage with everything. Now, if you're going to be focusing on power abilities, I would highly recommend that you give her a power ring because she just scales with her power stat really well. Well, honestly, both her power and her magic stat, she scales really well with both of those, but in different situations. So this would be the power build if you're going to go that route, and I'd highly recommend that you use Falcon Strike for this. Now, this will attack only the arms because it hits horizontally. It doesn't attack the head. However, something else to know is that for most of you, unless you pumped a bunch of speed stats into all your characters, like I've been speeding up my slowest character, so now everybody's pretty much even speed. But defaultly, both Ayla and Chrono are your two fastest characters that you have access to. Like, they are the fastest characters in the game. So, as a result, they can take out the arms faster than anybody else. Now, in my particular case, I am hasting them, but they can take out the arms faster, so thus you're taking less damage, which means the boss is more vulnerable. Also, having Ayla in your team will mean that you can charm the speed capsule off of the boss's face. Now, Robo and Ayla have some pretty decent dual techs against certain bosses, however, it does not work in this particular case. They can't use Beast Toss here, and thus, by extension, we can't use Boulder Toss either, which that is a really nice single target tech that Ayla has, but because we don't have access to that, Cat Attack is going to be your next best bet, which is not ideal. So you can use Ice Sword and Cat Attack, that's not a really good combination. You can also use Thunder Chomp and like either Star Ice or Star Ice 2. Both of those are not super great either. They're just kind of mana expensive and they don't really do that much damage. What's the best combination with this team composition is using Cube Toss. Cube Toss is a great ability, super awesome, boss killer. And then on top of that, then Chrono can either use Frenzy or Luminaire if you have enough MP to support it. So I would say overall this is another really solid choice for our team composition that you can use against this fight. We just have a lot of options, and honestly our equipment doesn't really matter that much either. Like, you can go ahead and use the plates if you want to, but you can totally heal with Marle if you need to, so it's great. We have a lot of healing, we have a lot of speed, we have a lot of damage. Again, whenever you use haste, you greatly increase your damage. Like, I don't even think the boss has even had a notification for commencing his arm restoration yet, which means he hasn't even started that process, which means we're killing this boss so much faster than the other fights I've shown so far. So I mentioned this earlier in the same video too, I think, but I was talking about how I've been boosting the speed on all my characters, and I boosted it up to 12, and the reason for that is because haste, the speed that you get from haste, it doubles whatever your current speed is, but it caps at 24. So as long as I have at least 12 speed, then I'm already capped on the speed I can possibly get using the haste buff. So next I'm going to show an obscure strategy that I'm sure a lot of you didn't realize, is that Ayla can scale with magic very, very well. So if you feed her a whole bunch of magic tabs and then give her a magic ring, then this fight can be an absolute joke. It's just really, really powerful. As I've explained earlier in this video, some techs are just flat out better. They just are better. They're really, really good because they have such high multipliers. And this ability, Inferno, is a great example of that. It's a dual tech between Ayla and Luca. In older versions of the game, it is called Fire Whirl. Not to be confused with Chrono and Luca's Fire Whirl. Oh no, this is Luca and Ayla's Fire Whirl. Oh yeah. So I'm really glad they renamed this because it's just way less confusing this way. Anyways, this has a very high multiplier with Ayla's magic stat. Luca's stats actually don't come into play at all, but if you beef up her magic stat, she can destroy the arms in one hit, and it also does massive damage to the boss's head as well. Now after you've destroyed the arms, go ahead and charm the boss real quick before you forget to get that speed capsule, But then otherwise, you can just go back to attacking. Now, we do have a bunch of different single target options with this team composition. However, Inferno is still the best choice because it just hits so hard. Now, normally, Ayla's magic stat is very low, and so to compensate for that, to make her damage not absolutely terrible for this tech, they made her have a very high multiplier. But the result of that is, if you give her a bunch of magic, it just means it's just so much better than everybody else's. Now, by the end of the game, you will end up capping a lot of your stats, and then she'll eventually get to the point where it's really, really good, but she's actually one of the best characters to pump all your magic into early. But yeah, this ability has one of the highest multipliers in the game. As I've talked about several different times, Ayla has very high multipliers for most of her abilities because she doesn't have a weapon. A lot of her damage is purely based on her stats, so as a result, she has higher multipliers to compensate for that. Which means, and also, just so you know, a lot of her dual techs are based off of her stats, not really so much based off of everybody else's. So she can take on the elemental affinity of whatever person she's dual teching with, but the damage is based on her, which is actually much to our advantage by pumping stats into her. So at this point, we have a whole bunch of cinematics that take place after this, but I will be showing those in the next video. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, be sure to throw a like on it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content just like this. As always, you guys are awesome, you have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.